What if Genghis Khan had satellites in the 13th century? A nomadic army swept out of the frozen Mongolian steppe and built a 9 million square mile empire, completely blind to what lay over the next hills. Now, hand Genghis Khan a 24-satellite constellation with 4K high-definition spy lenses and real-time GPS navigation. Watch till the end and let's find out whether these satellites are gonna be a nightmare for the world or not. Picture a traditional nomadic campsite in the year 1206. The wind is whipping across the open grassland at 40 miles an hour, rattling the felt walls of a massive 60-foot royal yurt. Inside, a roaring fire pit is keeping the room warm. But instead of old parchment maps spread across low wooden tables, the center of the tent is dominated by a glowing, ultra-high-definition holographic display screen. Genghis Khan, wearing his heavy fur coat and an iron helmet, is casually scrolling through real-time satellite imagery with his finger, tracking troop movements from a low Earth orbit of 300 miles up. This isn't your average historical war room. This is a nomadic space-age command center. The Mongols wouldn't just use satellites to look at things. They would treat them like an all-seeing eye gifted directly by Tengri, the eternal blue sky god. For a society that lived under the open sky and worshipped its vastness, a satellite network wouldn't feel like strange, alien technology. It would feel like their natural birthright. The logistical setup would be an absolute comedy of contrasts. Imagine a team of elite Mongol scouts who can traditionally track a single wild deer across 20 miles of rocky terrain just by looking at broken grass. Sitting in front of advanced dual monitor setups inside a felt tent, they are typing on rugged keyboards with dirty, calloused hands monitoring a 10 gigabit data stream. They wouldn't be looking for animal tracks anymore. They would be tracking the exact thermal heat signatures of 50,000 enemy soldiers across the continent before a single horse even crosses the Mongolian border. In our actual history timeline, the single biggest challenge for the Mongol war machine was the terrifying unknown. When they rode into uncharted territories like the thick, trackless forests of Russia or the massive, 30-foot-high walled networks of China, they were essentially flying blind. They had to rely entirely on captured local guides, who might deliberately lead them into a lethal swamp, or send out human scouts who had a 40% mortality rate due to enemy ambushes. Now delete the fog of war entirely. With a network of spy satellites constantly sweeping the globe, the entire planet becomes a completely open book. Imagine a proud, heavily armored European king or a brilliant Chinese general spending 8 months meticulously building a secret mountain fort, hiding his elite troops inside a dense, foggy valley, and setting up what he thinks is the perfect, unshakable ambush. He's sitting there laughing, thinking he's about to destroy the incoming nomads. Meanwhile, 3,000 miles away, Genghis Khan pulls up a high-definition thermal imaging satellite feed on his screen with a resolution down to 10 centimeters per pixel. He can see every single soldier, every hidden campfire, and even calculate that the enemy's supply wagons have exactly 14 days of grain left. The concept of a surprise attack completely vanishes from human warfare. The Mongols would see an ambush coming 3 weeks before it happened. They would use their GPS tracking to navigate their nimble ponies along an entirely different, completely unguarded mountain path, popping up directly behind the enemy army while they were still staring down the road waiting for them to show up. The greatest enemy of any nomadic horse army wasn't an iron shield wall or a rain of arrows. It was the weather. The Mongols relied entirely on an estimated 5 million grass-eating ponies to move their entire society across continents. A sudden, unexpected winter blizzard could freeze 30% of their herds to death in a single night. An intense summer drought could dry up the rivers, and a heavy downpour could turn a battlefield into a muddy swamp where a 1,000-pound horse would sink up to its knees, rendering lightning-fast cavalry maneuvers completely useless. But give the Khan a team of modern meteorological satellites, and the weather turns from a terrifying wildcard into their absolute best friend. The Mongol generals wouldn't just check if it was raining outside. They would have advanced algorithmic 7-day forecasts for entire continents, tracking barometric pressure and jet streams. If a satellite shows a massive, catastrophic blizzard forming over Siberia and moving toward Eastern Europe at 30 knots, the Mongols don't panic and run for cover. They look at the storm track, calculate the exact hour the sub-zero freeze will hit, and use it to their advantage. They would deliberately wait for the blizzard to turn local rivers into solid sheets of ice 4 feet thick, creating instant, smooth highways for their horses. Then, they would launch a high-speed winter invasion across frozen landscapes that their enemies assumed were completely impassable until spring. Conversely, if a satellite image shows an intense heat wave moving across a desert region, the Mongols would alter their route, steering their strings of ponies toward hidden valleys with fresh grass that they spotted from space, weaponizing atmospheric data to always fight in the absolute perfect conditions to run their massive empire. The historical Mongols created the Yam, an incredible system of horse relay stations spaced 25 miles apart where royal messengers could sprint across Asia by constantly swapping exhausted horses for fresh ones. It was the fastest communication network the ancient world had ever seen, allowing a message to travel 3,000 miles in about 2 weeks. But that was still a massive delay when trying to coordinate a multi-front war. With satellites in play, the Mongols don't just upgrade their mail system, they completely skip the invention of the telephone wire and go straight to global satellite-linked communications. Every single unit commander, from the grand generals down to the leader of a tiny 10-man squad, would carry a rugged, military-grade satellite phone strapped to their wooden saddle. The iconic bronze and gold passports that Mongol messengers used to carry to demand fresh horses would be replaced by high-security digital access keys encrypted with 256-bit security. Imagine the sheer speed of this military chain of command. A general on the banks of the Danube River in Europe spots a sudden opening in the enemy's defense line. He doesn't write a letter and wait a month for a rider to return with permission to attack. He pulls out his satellite phone, hits speed dial, and connects directly to Genghis Khan's royal yurt in Karakorum with zero latency. Hey Khan, the Hungarian army just split their forces, requesting permission to launch a pincer move. Genghis looks at the live satellite feed on his holographic screen, nods, and says, "Permission granted. I am uploading the optimal tactical route to your devices right now." A global empire stretching across thousands of miles would be managed with the tight, instantaneous coordination of a modern corporate boardroom. Let's pause the conquest for a second, because this brings up an absolutely wild question. If a 13th century nomadic empire suddenly gained access to 21st century space technology, how do you think the rest of the medieval world would react? Would European kingdoms think the Mongols were literal wizards controlling the stars? Or would they try to build their own giant wooden towers to launch fake satellites into the sky? Drop a comment below right now with your thoughts on how medieval kings would handle an enemy with GPS. We read every single comment, so let us know your craziest theories. Now, let's look at how this cosmic tech completely changes the actual economy and survival of the Mongol people on the ground. One of the most mind-boggling aspects of the Mongol military machine was that it wasn't just an army marching to war. It was an entire civilization on the move. When the Mongols went on a campaign, they dragged their families, their movable yurt houses, and massive sprawling herds of millions of sheep, goats, cows, and spare horses along with them, keeping this massive sea of livestock fed and watered while moving across barren deserts and rocky mountain ranges was a logistical puzzle that required each horse to consume roughly 5 pounds of dry grass per day. But with multispectral satellite imaging, the Mongols turn into the world's most efficient, high-tech farmers. These specialized satellites don't just take regular pictures. They scan the Earth using infrared light to measure the exact chlorophyll levels and moisture content of vegetation on the ground. Genghis Khan's logistics officers could look at a digital map of Asia and see exactly where the richest, most nutrient-dense fields of grass were growing in real time. They could plot a path across a 500-mile barren wasteland by connecting a dot-to-dot line of tiny, hidden oases and patches of green vegetation that were completely invisible from the ground. If a particular region was suffering from an overgrazing problem, the satellite data would flag it immediately, allowing the commanders to split the massive herds into smaller, organized columns of exactly 10,000 animals and route them down different valleys to prevent starvation. The entire empire would move across the planet like a perfectly oiled machine, always staying completely stocked with fresh meat, milk, and healthy, energetic warhorses, while the armies they were fighting were constantly running out of food and getting stuck in resource-depleted lands. During the 13th century, the ultimate defense against any nomadic invasion was a massive stone wall. Cities like Baghdad, Constantinople, and the heavily fortified metropolises of northern China spent centuries building towering, 40-foot thick stone walls, deep moats, and complex gatehouses designed to keep horse-riding raiders out forever. To an army that grew up living in felt tents, these giant stone fortresses were a massive headache that could stall a campaign for months or years. But space technology completely ruins the concept of a defensive wall. First of all, the Mongols wouldn't just use satellites to look at the walls. They would use synthetic aperture radar satellites that can pierce straight through solid stone, wood, and 15 feet of dirt. When the Mongol army rolls up to a legendary, supposedly unconquerable walled city, they don't sit outside and guess where to attack. They open their tablets and look at a complete structural X-ray blueprint of the city's entire defense system. They can see exactly where the walls are thin, where the underground water tunnels run, and where the city's main grain storage houses are located. Even worse for the defenders, the satellites would track every single civilian and soldier inside the city by their heat signatures. The Mongols would know exactly which gatehouse was lightly guarded at 3:00 in the morning. They would use their captured engineering corps to build massive trebuchets and catapults, but instead of firing blindly over the walls, they would feed the exact GPS coordinates of the city's command hubs, water reserves, and ammunition depots directly to the crew. Every single massive stone projectile and flaming explosive thrown by the Mongol artillery would land with pinpoint, satellite-guided precision, turning the inside of an unconquerable fortress into an absolute inferno within a few hours and forcing an immediate, terrified surrender. The Mongols were deeply spiritual people who placed massive importance on omens, signs from nature, and the prophecies of their shamans before launching any major military campaign or making a big political decision. Genghis Khan would climb to the top of a sacred mountain, fast for 3 days, and wait for the spirits to send him a sign through the behavior of birds, the shape of clouds, or the sudden appearance of lightning. With a private satellite constellation at their disposal, the court shamans would suddenly become the most accurate prophets in human history. They wouldn't have to guess what the gods were thinking, they would just read the telemetry data. Imagine a rival tribal chief or an rebellious king mocking Genghis Khan, claiming that the heavens are on his side and that a great fire from the sky will destroy the Mongol army. The head shaman walks out of his yurt, looks up at the sky and says, "The Allfather Tengri is angry with you." In exactly 3 minutes and 14 seconds, the sun will turn as black as night, and the earth will grow cold as a sign of your doom. The shaman isn't magic. He is just looking at an astronomy tracking app linked to a satellite that predicted a total solar eclipse down to the exact millisecond. The eclipse hits right on cue. The enemy army drops their weapons in absolute paralyzing terror and falls to their knees to surrender. The Mongols could use satellite data to predict volcanic ash clouds, meteor showers, and seasonal river floods, branding these natural occurrences as direct expressions of Genghis Khan's divine right to rule, creating an aura of supernatural invincibility that would make resisting them feel like trying to fight the universe itself. As the decades pass, this hyper-surveilled, space-optimized nomadic world evolves into a completely unique global civilization. The Mongol Empire doesn't fracture or break apart into separate kingdoms like it did in our timeline, because the absolute speed of information and logistics provided by their satellite network allows a single, centralized ruler to keep a firm, unshakable grip on every single corner of the globe. The world enters a permanent era of high-tech nomadism. Cities don't grow into massive, polluted concrete jungles. Instead, humanity maintains a deep connection to the open land, living in highly advanced, modular, movable structures that can be packed up and relocated based on satellite data showing the best seasonal climates and resources. The Silk Road is no longer just a dirt path for camels. It is a global, orbital network of data streams, trade routes, and automated transport lanes managed by the Central Space Agency in Mongolia. When modern scientists in this alternate timeline look up at the night sky, they don't see a chaotic mess of commercial space junk and corporate satellites. They see a beautifully organized, gleaming constellation of orbital stations emblazoned with the official seal of the Great Khan. The sky isn't a mysterious frontier to be explored. It is the ultimate, eternal blue guardian that helped a group of horse riders unite the planet, turning the entire Earth into one peaceful, hyper-connected, and completely open step under the watchful eye of history's ultimate cosmic empire. What alternate history scenario should we tackle next? Should we look at what happens if the Aztecs had modern drones? Or maybe how history changes if the ancient Egyptians built a high-speed railway? Drop your best ideas for our next video in the comments below. And if you want to make sure you never miss another deep dive into history's craziest what-ifs, make sure to hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications, and smash the like button. Thanks for watching Stickman History What If, and we'll see you in the next timeline.